Hey, it's your challenger coach, Adam Moriarty-Isles, here to bring you a rundown of the huge new changes Riot just announced for this upcoming preseason, so let's jump right into it. First up, we have Elemental Rifts. Every third dragon, based on the attribute of that dragon that just spawned, the map itself will change for the remainder of the game, and on top of that, the only other dragons that can spawn will be that element. The Infernal Rift will create new pass-through buff camps while also opening up the entrance to the Dragon Pit. What this will do is create new juke spots for jungle fights and make fighting in the Dragon Pit itself a lot easier when dealing with AoE camps so that you can make that last stand in the Dragon Pit if needed. The Ocean Rift will spawn new brushes to grow or expand current ones to be larger while also spawning extra honey fruit around the map. This one I feel like will be more impactful than the Infernal changes, as increasing the amount of ambush spots the enemy fed assassins can hide in will be a nightmare to deal with. This is going to be huge for champions like Rengar or Kha'Zix, as if they needed buffs anyway. The Cloud Rift will actually spawn wind currents around the dragon area and other areas like the jungle that will give you a boost of movement speed. This seems to me to be another impactful change to the map, as this will apply mid-combat, allowing people to make a lot of nice jukes or engages that otherwise wouldn't really be possible. For the Mountain Rift, it will spawn a bunch of rocks around the map in an attempt to create more choke points. This will be huge for AoE style team comps or zone control champions like Heimerdinger or Caitlyn, allowing them to even more easily control space around neutral objective fights. Overall, I like most of these changes as they seem to change the map enough to be impactful, but not so much that it feels like a massive gimmick that ruins the game. Thank God they didn't add a Ghost Rift for some reason where a ghost dragon flies around the map killing everyone. That would be a real shame if that ever got into the game. Next up, we have the elemental buff changes aimed at making them a bit more equal in terms of strength. Infernal Might will still give you extra damage, as you'll gain a percentage of increased attack damage and ability power. Ocean's Will is still pretty much regen, as you'll regenerate a percentage of missing health every second. Cloudbringer's Grace will be our new utility buff, as you will gain cooldown reduction towards your ultimate ability. And Mountain's Vigor is basically our new tank dragon, gaining a percentage increase of armor and magic resist. The biggest changes are to the Cloud and Mountain Drakes. The movement speed was actually pretty good, but depending on the numbers, the ultimate CDR could be even better. Mountain though is a great change, so teams can't RNG and rush down objectives which no one actually liked playing against. It'll also make tanks more viable in the late game while allowing carries to survive assassins even easier. Our next addition is that we Dark Soul now, but instead we collect a Dragon Soul only after the 4th dragon of the game is killed, and the soul will not be lost when you die along with the rest of your progress in the game. The 4 different souls are Infernal Dragon Soul, the combat buff. Every 3 seconds your next attacker damaging spell creates a small AoE explosion, dealing adaptive damage that scales with bonus attack damage, ability power, and bonus health. The Ocean Dragon Soul, the sustain buff, will make it so that dealing any damage triggers strong health and resource regeneration for 3 seconds. Damaging the minions provides less regeneration, and it will likely also regenerate energy. We got the Cloud Dragon Soul, also known as the Spear Sojin buff. Hitting enemies with abilities or attacks lower the cooldown of your base abilities. And then lastly, we have the Mountain Dragon Soul, the tank buff. After not taking damage for 5 seconds, gain a shield that lasts until destroyed. The shield's magnitude scales with bonus attack damage, ability power, and bonus health. These changes are meant to put more emphasis on late game dragon control with how powerful all of these Dragon Soul buffs are. You can no longer play passively and give up that 25-minute Cloud Dragon, or else you'll suffer at the hands of Riven button matching her abilities faster than she would in the new fighting game. The Elder Dragon will still give a powerful short-term combat buff, but it will not scale off the team with more dragons. Instead, it's going to give Elder Immolation, which is an instant execute for those who burn below a certain health threshold. Not only does this look badass, but it gives teams another comeback mechanic since it's not relying on past dragons to be strong. I mean, the execute will have some counterplays in the forms of Zhonya's and Tryndamere ult, for example, but this buff will truly be the late game teamfight deciding buff. Even if you're 10k gold behind, you will still have a shot to win teamfights with this thing. So if you're a jungler and you don't try to steal it when your team is behind, you're trolling. As for side lane changes, Riot added identical alcoves in both top lane and bottom lane. Both alcoves feature 3 patches of brush on their outer edges and a small space in their center for champions to juke around or hide in. Basically, not only does this allow the side lanes extra room to fight it out 2v2 or 1v1 for some nice juke outplays, but more importantly, it will allow the side lanes to buy time during gank situations so that they can either escape or even have extra room to kite so they can outplay the gank. Finally, there are 2 new patches of permanent brush opposite the Baron and Dragon Pits. These are pretty high traffic areas, especially during the mid to late game when you're trying to contest neutral objectives, and this will allow teams an extra ambush option during that time. Looking at you, new scary version of Fiddlesticks, that one's for you. As is tradition, Riot is looking to change up jungle pathing during this preseason. Currently, junglers rely too much on Krug's XP, so Riot is nerfing it in favor of buffing Gromp XP. And they will also be adding in respawn timers like blue and red buff for every camp in the game. The XP changes will allow junglers to actually diversify pathing instead of feeling like they always have to start red side to get Krugs to respawn faster, which I feel is a good thing. As for the normal camp spawn timers on the minimap, it's actually been out in China for a while now, and from watching streams, I can honestly say that it's a nice addition to the jungle role. It frees you up to actually think about tough jungler decisions like, should I camp top lane even though he's feeding, or should I help out mid lane even though he's feeding, instead of having to spend time thinking about when your camps respawn. We also got some changes to XP where minion XP increases slightly so solo laners level a bit faster, and they're reducing the amount of bonus XP generated when allies share XP so bot lane levels a bit slowly. Not only that, but jungle XP will also be taking a slight hit. This means that there will be a wider XP gap between solo laners and the rest of the crew, allowing them to carry harder if you snowball the laning phase, as you will likely be able to 1v2 ganks or the enemy bot lane. Hashenshin and other top laners, this buff's for you. Additionally, we also have the Rift Herald spawning earlier, allowing Shelly to spawn twice if you kill her fast enough. This change is also aimed at putting more agency on the top side of the map, as you will now have a real win condition to go for if you camp for top lane to balance out the strengths of the new dragons. We also got some item changes, starting with support. You will no longer need to spend gold to upgrade your quest item, it will just happen automatically, but the stats will be slightly weaker to compensate. This kind of reminds me of when green wards were removed from the game in favor of trinkets, because people just weren't buying wards, so Riot gave it to them for free. In this case, support players on average, especially newer ones, have no idea when to buy the upgrade, so they're just free now. More importantly though, coin was removed from the game and replaced with 4 starting item choices. We got the high AD low HP option with Spell Thieves passive, we have the high AP low HP Spell Thieves passive one as well, and the low AD high HP Targon's passive with the low AP high HP Targon's passive as well. This was just done to give supports both more options and remove a non-interactive style of gold income. Personally, when I saw changes to support items, I was hoping for some nerfs, but this will have to do for now. Next up, we got lethality item changes since choices at the moment are kind of limited. We got Dustblade being mostly the same, Ghostblade being mostly the same, Edge and Night Spell Shield will now work like Banshee's Veil, and Gwyn Blade is a new lethality item that enables swift pushing. Its unique passive will grant a huge attack speed buff when no allies are nearby, and then they're also exploring other potential lethality options on the PvE soon. The key part of the lethality changes though is that they'll have a 1 item and 2 item set bonus, allowing them to keep their early power spikes, but this will mean that you're kind of forced to branch out outside of lethality items to things like Cleaver or LDR in the late game to keep your damage output high. This is because the individual lethality items will be slightly weaker than their current versions. Overall though, this is looking good for AD assassins, as they can feel really one-dimensional at the moment. They always build the same items, they always try and win the game the same way by suiciding the backline, and they have no options from behind. But with new items like Sanguine Blade, champions like Zed can actually look to split push like a Tryndamere as a win condition, which is awesome for Zed players, not so much for other people. Lastly, for items, thank you so much Riot Games for removing Spear of Revengef's Sojin from the game. It will no longer be an item, as it was problematic to balance and it would have gotten out of hand with the new Cloud Dragon buff along with the new Cloud Dragon Soul, making those 3 champions turn into Bruiser, Machine Gun, Rise. I'm really happy to see this kind of foresight when balancing the preseason. The last changes announced to the preseason will be Conqueror losing its true damage. It was almost single-handedly pushing tanks out of top lane, so with it being made to focus more on stacking adaptive power, you will likely see tanks make a comeback during the preseason. Kleptomancy, especially recently, is another problematic rune that was used to abuse melee top laners, especially tanks, will be refocused towards elixir drops rather than gold generation. This change is also aimed at making top lane less of a living nightmare for melee champions, so it isn't dominated by disgusting stuff like Klepto Vladimir. Get that out of top lane. Aftershock, yet another rune that was hard to balance in Season 9, is further being pushed towards tanks by reducing its flat resistances. I'm looking at you, Lissandra. You're pretty much responsible for this one as a prime squishy champion that abused Aftershock during Season 9, and Riot has no intention of allowing this to happen in the future. Thanks for watching our preseason rundown video, and be sure to check out more content from Mobalytics on this channel, on Twitch, or at mobalytics.gg.